Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of Philip K. Dick's lesser known yet deeply unsettling novels, Dr. Bloodmoney, or How We Got Along After the Bomb. Written in 1965, this book is an eerie blend of post-apocalyptic survival, Cold War paranoia, and Dick's signature exploration of identity and mental instability. What sets Dr. Bloodmoney apart from other post-nuclear war stories is that it doesn't focus on the usual bleakness and devastation, even though there is plenty of rich and palpable descriptions of what it feels like to witness a nuclear explosion. Instead, PKD focuses on a bizarre yet functional society 7 years after what is coined Emergency Day, the day that World War III hits. He describes a world that has somehow adapted to nuclear catastrophe, with remnants of the old world clinging to life in strange and unexpected ways. In today's review, I will examine the significance of PKD's use of the last man in space, the shift in value and power in a post-apocalyptic world, and I am going to read you 2 excerpts today. So as this will probably run a little longer than usual, do make use of the timestamps to skip to the parts that interest you. Let's get started. Set in 1981, Dr. Bloodmoney takes place after a nuclear disaster has shattered civilization. Unlike many post-apocalyptic stories that dwell on the immediate horrors of nuclear war, PKD instead gives us a world where humanity is just getting on with things. There are small, self-sufficient communities, scavenger economies, and survivors adapting in strange and often grotesque ways. The story revolves around multiple characters, but at its core it's about 2 people. Bruno Bluthgeld, a nuclear physicist whose mistakes led to the war and who now lives in hiding, plagued by paranoia and delusions of grandeur. And Hoppy Harrington, a severely disabled pocomelic, meaning born without limbs, who possesses psychic abilities such as precognition and telekinesis, the ability to move or manipulate objects using only the mind, without any physical interaction. The character of Bluthgeld, translating to Bloodmoney in English, represents the destructive hubris of unchecked scientific ambition, an archetype that Dick often revisits. Hoppy, on the other hand, embodies a strange form of empowerment, overcoming physical disability through not supernatural means, but becoming increasingly unstable in the process. Meanwhile, we also follow Stuart McConchie, a 20-something black salesman turned survivor who struggles to navigate the new world. Bonny Keller, a strong-willed married woman in her 30s who keeps having affairs with all kinds of people. Eddie Keller, the precognitive daughter of Bonny Keller, is convinced that she has an invisible brother whom she talks to. Later on in the novel, it turns out that the brother does indeed exist as homunculus in her belly, and whose consciousness is able to jump into people close by. Eventually, he will take over the body of Hoppy. Lastly, there's the character of Walt Dangerfield, an astronaut who was supposed to be the first human to travel to Mars, but ends up stranded in space, orbiting the ruined Earth and serving as an unintended radio broadcaster for the survivors below. These characters' lives intersect in many ways that make the novel feel like a hallucinogenic slice of life novel set in a world gone mad. Overcoat over his arm, Bruno Bluthgeld walked up Oxford Street through the campus of the University of California, bent over and not looking about him. He knew the route well, and he did not care to see the students, the young people. He was not interested in the passing cars or in the buildings so many of them knew. He did not see the city of Berkeley because he was not interested in it. He was thinking, and it seemed to him very clearly now that he understood what it was that was making him sick. He did not doubt that he was sick. He felt deeply sick. It was only a question of locating the source of contamination. It was, he thought, coming to him from the outside, this illness, the terrible infection that had sent him at last to Dr. Stockstill. Had the psychiatrists, on the basis of today's visit, any valid theory? Bruno Bluthgeld doubted it. And then, as he walked, he noticed that all the cross streets to the left leaned, and as if the city was sinking on that side, and as if gradually it was keeling over. Bluthgeld felt amused because he recognized the distortion. It was his astigmatism which became acute when he was under stress. Yes, he felt as if he were walking along a tilted sidewalk, raised on one side, so that everything had a tendency to slide. He felt himself sliding very gradually, and he had trouble placing one foot before the other. He had a tendency to veer, to totter to the left, too, along with the other things. Sense data, so vital, he thought, not merely what you perceive, but how. He chuckled as he walked. Easy to lose your balance when you have an acute astigmatic condition, he said to himself. How pervasively the sense of balance enters into our awareness of the universe around us. Hearing is derived from the sense of balance. It's an unrecognized basic sense underlying the others. Perhaps I have picked up a mild labyrinthitis, a virus infection of the middle ear. Should have it looked into. And yes, now the distortion in the sense of balance had begun affecting his hearing, and as he had anticipated. It was fascinating how the eye and the ear joined to produce a gestalt. First his eyesight, then his balance. Now he heard things askew. He heard as he walked a dull, deep echo which rose from his own footsteps, from his shoes striking the pavement. Not the sharp, brisk noise that a woman's shoe might make, but a shadowy, low sound, a rumble, almost as if it rose from a pit or cave. It was not a pleasant sound. It hurt his head, sending up reverberations that were acutely painful. He slowed, altered his pace, watched his shoes strike the pavement so as to anticipate the sound. I know what this is due to, he said to himself. He had experienced it in the past, this echoing of normal noises in the labyrinths of his ear passages. Like the distortion in vision, it had a simple psychological basis, although for years it had puzzled and frightened him. It was due simply to tense posture, skeletal tension, specifically at the base of the neck. In fact, by turning his head from side to side, he could test his theory out. He heard the neck vertebrae give a little crack, a short, sharp sound that set up immediately the most immensely painful reverberations in his ear channels. I must be dreadfully worried today, Bruno Bluthgeld said to himself, for now an even greater alteration in his sense perceptions was setting in, and one unfamiliar to him. A dull, smoky cast was beginning to settle all over the environment around him, making the buildings and cars seem like inert, gloomy mounds without colour or motion. And where are the people? He seemed to be plodding along totally by himself in his listing, difficult journey up Oxford Street to where he had parked his Cadillac. Had they, odd though, all gone indoors? As if he thought to get out of the rain, this rain of fine, sooty particles that seemed to fill the air, to impede his breathing, his sight, his progress. He stopped, and standing there at the intersection, seeing down the side street where it descended into a kind of darkness, and then off to the right where it rose and snapped off, as if twisted and broken, he saw to his amazement, and this he could not explain immediately in terms of some specific psychological impairment of function, that cracks had opened up. The buildings to his left had split, jagged breaks in them, as if the hardest of substances, the cement itself which underlay the city, making up the streets and buildings, the very foundation around him, were coming apart. Good Christ, he thought, what is it? He peered into the sooty fog. Now the sky was gone, obscured entirely by the rain of dark. And then he saw picking about in the gloom among the split sections of concrete in the debris, little shriveled shapes, people, the pedestrians who had been there before and then vanished. They were back now, but all of them dwarfed and gaping at him sightlessly, not speaking, but simply poking around in an aimless manner. What is it? He asked himself again, this time speaking aloud. He heard his voice dully rebounding. It's all broken. The town is broken up into pieces. What has hit it? What has happened to it? He began to walk from the pavement, finding his way among the strewn, severed parts of Berkeley. It isn't me, he realized. Some great, terrible catastrophe has happened. The noise now boomed in his ears, and the soot stirred, moved by the noise. A car horn sounded, stuck on, but very far off and faint. The character of Walt Dangerfield, the man who is doomed to forever circle Earth in his satellite, is a complex literary tool. PKD has Dangerfield read books to planet Earth, and the survivors heavily depend on his daily broadcasts. It is worthwhile looking into PKD's choice of literature in this context. He has Dangerfield read the book of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. This choice is deeply symbolic and thematically resonant with Dick's own philosophical concerns. There are several reasons why this novel in particular would appeal to him and serve as a meaningful selection for the remnants of humanity in a post-apocalyptic world. It is fundamentally about enduring suffering and finding meaning despite hardship. The protagonist's philosophical journey, which involves questioning religion, free will, and the randomness of suffering, aligns with the broader existential themes in PKD's own work. In Dr. Bloodmoney, characters grapple with the meaning of survival, identity, and human nature in the face of catastrophe. Of Human Bondage serves as a reflection of their own internal struggles. Both novels explore the limits of human control. The protagonist believes at different points that he can master his own destiny, whether through art, love, or medicine, only to be repeatedly humbled by forces beyond his control. Similarly, in Dr. Bloodmoney, the remnants of society must contend with a world where technology, war, and cosmic accidents dictate their fates more than personal ambition or willpower. Walt Dangerfield, trapped in orbit, is a surrogate, a parental figure, a distant but vital voice offering comfort and continuity to the people below. He offers a kind of guidance through hardship, even if it's simply through literature rather than action. By reading Of Human Bondage, he metaphorically suggests that life's struggles must be endured and that meaning can be found even in suffering. For me, Walt Dangerfield's character made me think about how we tend to project ourselves onto a counterpart and how that is probably the essence of religion also. I'm referring to the psychological mechanisms of projection. In this context, religious belief is essentially a projection of idealized human qualities onto a divine being. Gurus, prophets, and saints function as projections of the individual's own undeveloped potential. This becomes apparent to me in the scene where later in the novel that mechanism of projection gets broken by circumstances. What happens when a projection breaks? Well, you can equate it to the feeling that you had when you were a little child and when you stopped believing in the Easter Bunny or Santa or whatever lore it is you have in your culture. There is a moment of despair. The projection shatters and you are left to your own devices. In psychological terms, that is the point where you are given a chance to take back your projection and integrate the qualities you did project outward within yourself. Essentially, that is also what happens when you fall in love and, of course, when you practice a religion. In the context of the book's main theme, that of thermonuclear war, you can see that at some point humans need to take back all their projections. They have to grow up in the sense of being their own person, no longer outsourcing responsibility to some third party, be it a political or religious leader. And inasmuch as you can regard Piketty's novel as Entwicklungsroman as well. Being a fully developed and individuated human being means to acknowledge oneself and life completely, including one's own weaknesses and the basic futility of a lot of things we tend to put our money on over the course of our lives. What is real is what is now. What matters is who we are in each moment. To be human is to be flawed, and that is okay. One of the most fascinating aspects of this book is, of course, the many ways power structures have shifted in the post-apocalypse. Instead of traditional military or political leaders rising to dominance, it's the outcasts, the mutants, the psychics, and the overlooked who now shape the world. Hoppy Harrington, who was dismissed and pitied in the old world, becomes something of a god in the new one. His ability to manipulate reality gives him unchecked power, but his childlike and vengeful nature makes him terrifyingly unpredictable. This plays into one of Piketty's recurring ideas, the dangers of power in the hands of those who have been abused and marginalized. Meanwhile, Bluthgeld remains convinced that he is secretly controlling reality, even though he is in many ways irrelevant. His paranoia and delusions mirror the Cold War anxieties of the time, where scientists and governments played God with nuclear power while being completely disconnected from the people they affected. I'm sure we could name a few contemporary politicians that exhibit a God complex, and the anxieties we are prone to feeling today probably are comparable to the 60s. The contrast between these two characters, one physically disabled but mentally empowered, the other intellectually powerful but psychologically shattered, forms the backbone of the novel's tension. Unlike many other post-apocalyptic narratives that focus on complete societal collapse, Dr. Bloodmoney portrays a world that is battered but still alive, demonstrating human resilience and ingenuity. Communities, though isolated, have established new social structures, and a form of barter economy replaces money in many places. People improvise to make use of whatever resources remain. In my opinion, Piketty's description of the post-nuclear world is far too optimistic and almost romantic. From the little that I know about thermonuclear war, Earth would certainly become completely uninhabitable in the first 10 or so years after the bombs drop. I'm going to put some links in the description box below for you to follow up on this if you're interested. But let's for a moment play along with PKD's concept. What I found valuable and astonishing also is the level of detail that he weaves into the story with regards to the shift in values after such a catastrophe. For instance, since fuel is scarce, people resort to having horses pull cars, turning them into makeshift carriages. The car itself remains symbolic as an object of value from the past, even if it no longer functions as intended. Glass, once common material, becomes a rarity. Windows, bottles, and even eyeglasses are treasured because they're nearly impossible to manufacture with the limited post-war technology. With much of civilization's infrastructure destroyed, literacy and knowledge hold new significance. Individuals who remember pre-war skills and sciences become crucial figures in their communities. Those are just a few examples. As with much of Dick's work, the novel probes the fragility of human ethics and the social structure that defines civilization. Through its intricate character portrayals and dystopian setting, Dr. Bloodmoney raises crucial questions about the essence of morality and whether civilization is a mere construct of stability or an intrinsic human necessity. One of the primary themes in Dr. Bloodmoney is the role of morality when the structures of civilization collapse. Prior to the nuclear catastrophe, morality is largely dictated by societal institutions, government, law, and shared cultural norms. However, in the aftermath, morality becomes fluid, dependent on individual survival instincts and power dynamics. The novel presents a range of characters, each embodying different moral responses to the post-apocalyptic world. Hoppy Harrington, for instance, is the disabled but highly intelligent character who, before the disaster, was marginalized due to his condition. Post-catastrophe, he uses his unique abilities to manipulate and control others, demonstrating how power can corrupt moral reasoning when societal constraints are removed. His actions raise the question of whether morality is an inherent human quality or a product of external enforcement. Conversely, Stuart McConchie seeks to maintain dignity and fairness in his dealings, suggesting that some individuals carry an internalized moral compass independent of societal collapse. McConchie's character serves as a counterpoint to the idea that civilization alone dictates ethical behavior, hinting at a deeper, possibly innate sense of right and wrong. The novel also examines whether civilization is a fundamental human need or a superficial construct that crumbles under pressure. The small, fragmented communities that emerge after the disaster resemble microcosms of pre-apocalypse society, but they lack the comprehensive structures of governance and justice. This fractured civilization reflects Dick's skepticism about the stability of societal order. The absence of a centralized government leads to both vigilantism and functioning self-governance, illustrating civilization's paradoxical nature. It provides order, but is fragile in its dependence on systems that are able to enforce law and order. Dr. Bloodmoney himself, a scientist whose work inadvertently contributes to global destruction, symbolizes the double-edged nature of civilization. His knowledge represents human progress, yet his actions demonstrate how technological advancement without moral consideration inevitably leads to catastrophe. Dick questions whether civilization, particularly in its pursuit of scientific and technological progress, is sustainable or inherently self-destructive. Ultimately, Dr. Bloodmoney challenges the reader to consider whether morality is an intrinsic human trait or merely a byproduct of civilization. It also questions whether civilization is an essential pillar of human existence or a fragile artificial structure that disintegrates in crisis. The second excerpt today is actually the Afterword, written by Philip K. Dick, I suppose. This was added on too in this later version of the book. Well, I predicted wrong when I wrote Dr. Bloodmoney back in 1964. Events that I forecast never came about, and as you read this novel, you will see what I mean. But it is not the job really of science fiction to predict. Science fiction only seems to predict. It's like the aliens on Star Trek, all of whom speak English. A literary convention is involved here, nothing more. I am amused, however, to see what specifically I got wrong. Worst of all, I totally misread the future of the manned space program. But this only shows how rapidly history unfolds. In Dr. Bloodmoney, I have one American circling the world forever. This is obvious nonsense. Either there would be many Americans, and many Russians for that matter, or none at all. Of course, the major item that I got wrong is the end of the world. Back in 1964, I was expecting it any time. I kept checking my watch. Horace Gold, who edited Galaxy magazine, once chided me for anticipating global wipeout within the next week. That was back around 1954. I anticipated it by 1964. Well, such were the fears of the times. Right now we have other worries. Our problems seem to be paying our debts with incredibly inflated dollars, finding gas for our cars, much more mundane worries, less cosmic. Oddly, these are the sort of worries that assail the characters in Dr. Bloodmoney in their post-World War III world. There are horses pulling cars. Eyeglasses are rare and treasured. A man who manufactures cigarettes is honoured wherever he goes. Of supreme value is someone who can fix things. Society has reverted, but not to the brutal level that we might expect. Rather, it has become rural in nature. The vast cities are gone, and in their place a sort of countryside exists that is not awful at all. I must add, however, that in no sense does it resemble any world that we actually have. But then, of course, we haven't had World War III. In my opinion, this is an extremely hopeful novel. It does not posit the end of human civilization as a result of the next war. People are still around and they are still coping. Those who survive, anyhow, are fairly lucky in their new lives. What is interesting is the subtle change in the relative power status of the survivors. Take Hoppy Harrington, who has no arms or legs before the bomb hits. Hoppy is marginal in terms of power. He's fortunate if he can get any kind of job at all. But in the post-war world, this is not the case. Hoppy is elevated by stealthy increments until at last he is a menace to man, not even on the planet's surface. Hoppy has become a demigod, and a complex one at that. He is not really evil in the usual sense, but here is an instance of the abuse of power, evil emanating from power per se. It is not so much that Hoppy is evil, but that his power is evil. In The Satellite, Walt Dangerfield is transformed from a man assisting the fragmented post-war society, giving it unity and strength, raising its morale, to a man desperate for help from it, a man who is becoming weaker day by day. He signifies isolation, which is the horror of many down below. Isolation and the loss of the objects and values that comprised their original world. As time passes, Walt Dangerfield must gain strength from those on the planet's surface rather than giving strength to them. And into the vacuum created comes Hoppy Harrington, who epitomizes the monster in us, the person who is hungry. Not hungry for food, but hungry for coercive control over others. This drive in Hoppy stems from a physical deprivation. It is compensation for what he lacked from birth. Hoppy is incomplete, and he will complete himself at the expense of the entire world. He will psychologically devour it. You will note in Dr. Bloodmoney an account of a test conducted in 1972 that turned out to be a catastrophe, and of course there was in fact no such test and no such catastrophe. But then there was no such person as Dr. Bluthgeld. This is a work of fiction, and yet at a certain level it is not. The West Marin County area where much of the novel is set is an area that I knew well. When I wrote the novel, I lived in the area. Many of the features that I describe are real, so a great deal of the veridical is blended in with the fiction. As do some of the characters, I searched for wild mushrooms in West Marin, and I found the varieties they find and avoided the varieties they avoid. It is one of the most beautiful areas in the United States and is called by the Sierra Club the Island in Time. When I lived there in the late 50s and early 60s, it was set apart from the rest of California and therefore seemed to me a natural locus for a post-war microcosm of society. Already, in fact, West Marin was a little world. When I read over Dr. Bloodmoney, I discovered to my pleasure that I have captured in words much of that little world that I so loved, a little world from which I am now separated by time and distance. My favorite character in the novel is the TV salesman Stuart McConchie, who happens to be black. In 1964, when I wrote Dr. Bloodmoney, it was daring to have a major character be a black man. My God, how much change has taken place in these recent years. But what an excellent change, one we can be proud of. In my first novel, Solar Lottery, I had a black man as captain of a spaceship, daring indeed for a novel published in 1955. Stuart is, in my opinion, the focus of the novel, and he appears first. It is through his eyes that we initially see Dr. Bluthgeld, which is to say Dr. Bloodmoney. Stuart's reaction is simple. He is seeing a lunatic, and that is that. Bonny Keller, however, knowing Dr. Bluthgeld more intimately, holds a more complex view of the man. Frankly, I tend to see Bluthgeld as Stuart McConchie sees him. I am, so to speak, Stuart McConchie, and at one time I was a TV salesman at a store on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley. Like Stuart, I used to sweep the sidewalk in front of the store in the early morning, noticing the cute girls on the way to work. So I have to confess to an overly simple view of Dr. Bluthgeld. I hate him, and I hate everything he stands for. He is the alien and he is the enemy. I cannot fathom his mind, I cannot understand his hates. It is not the Russians I fear, it is the Dr. Bluthgelds, the Dr. Bloodmoneys in our own society that terrify me. I am sure that to the extent that they know me or would know me, they hate me back and would do exactly to me what I would do to them. This is our initial glimpse of Dr. Bloodmoney, through the eyes of a man pushing a broom. I am with the man pushing the broom, here at the beginning of the novel and all the way to the end. Stuart McConchie is an astute man, and in seeing Dr. Bloodmoney he has experienced a moment of instant insight that Bonny Keller in her years of personal intimate knowledge lacks. I admit to prejudice here. I think the first response by the man pushing the broom can be trusted. Dr. Bloodmoney is sick, and sick in a way that is dangerous to the rest of us, and much of the evil in our world now emanates from such men, because such men do exist. So in writing Dr. Bloodmoney in 1964, I have erred in many of my predictions, but upon reading the novel recently, I sensed a basic accuracy in it, an accuracy about human beings and their power to survive. Not survive as beasts either, but as genuine humans doing genuinely human things. There are no supermen in this novel. There are no heroic deeds. There are some very poor predictions on my part, I must admit, but about the people themselves and their strength and tenacity and vitality, there I think I foresaw accurately. Because of course I was not predicting, I was only describing what I saw around me, the men and women and children and animals, the life of this planet that has been, is and will be, no matter what happens. I am proud of the people in this novel, and as I say, I would like to number myself as one of them. I once pushed a broom on the sidewalk of Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, and I felt the joy and sense of busy activity and industry that Stuart feels, the excitement, the sense of the future. And as the novel depicts, despite the war that did not in fact happen, it is a good future. I would have enjoyed being there with them in their microcosm, their post-war West Marin world. The book is a weird, unsettling and thought-provoking novel. It's not a typical post-apocalyptic story. It's stranger, more fragmented, more psychological. It doesn't dwell on the horrors of nuclear war so much as the absurdity of what comes after. If you're into Philip K. Dick's reality-bending, paranoia-fueled storytelling, this book is for you. However, be warned, it's not a clean and structured narrative. It's messy, disjointed, and at times feels like it's spiraling into chaos. But that's exactly what makes it so brilliant. I'm giving Dr. Bloodmoney 5 out of 5 homeostatic vermin traps. A fantastic read, but one that demands an appreciation for the bizarre. Last but not least, we'll have a couple of my drawings to look at on the way out. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, subscribe, and come back to the channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.